My name is Evie Calloway. I'm 31 years old. For most of my life, I was the daughter my family forgot to love. My older brother Dominic had the charm. My mother had the grief she never let go of. And my father James Calloway had the empire, a property development company worth £68 million, built on the bones of a woman nobody ever talked about, my grandmother Rosalind. They told me she died penniless. They told me she was difficult, unstable, a woman who made poor decisions and burned every bridge she ever crossed. They lied. I found out the truth in the back of a solicitor's office in Edinburgh on a Tuesday afternoon in March, while my father was 300 miles away in London, raising a glass of shade out Patris to my brother's new title, CEO of Calloway Estates. What was inside that envelope didn't just change my life. It changed everything they thought they'd buried. I grew up in two worlds simultaneously, and I never quite belonged to either. My father, James Calloway, was born in Glasgow to a woman named Rosalind who cleaned office buildings by night and read legal textbooks by day. He never talked about that. By the time I was born, he had remade himself entirely, the kind of English-accented, bespoke-suited man who summered in the Cotswolds, and kept a flat in Belgravia that he referred to without irony as the London pied-à-terre. My mother, Claire, was Old Hampshire money. Horses, hunting weekends, a Georgian farmhouse with a name instead of a number. She married my father in 1989 when property developers were the new aristocracy, and nobody asked too hard about where the ambition came from. She loved him the way women of her background were taught to love, quietly, decoratively, at a slight remove. Dominic came first. Golden-haired, broad-shouldered, the effortless product of two people who'd been told their whole lives that they deserved the best. He slid into every room like he'd been expected. Teachers loved him. Girls loved him. My father loved him in the particular, consuming way that some fathers love their firstborn sons, as though the boy were a mirror they could finally be proud of. Then there was me. I arrived 3 years later, smaller than expected, quieter than planned. Where Dominic laughed loudly and filled spaces, I watched from corners. Where he made friends in minutes, I needed months to trust anyone. My mother called it shyness. My father called it, when he thought I wasn't listening, the Rosalind in her. I didn't know what that meant for a long time. What I knew was this: every Christmas, every school play, every parent-teacher evening, the same geometry repeated itself. Dominic at the center. My parents orbiting him, and me just slightly outside the frame, present enough that no one could accuse them of neglect, invisible enough that no one ever thought to ask how I was doing. I learned to make myself useful. I became the quiet one who remembered birthdays, who organized the family holidays, who noticed when my mother's wine glass was getting too full and quietly moved it out of reach. I was the family's support structure, invisible and load-bearing. Nobody names their support structures. They only notice them when they fail. At 18, I was accepted to study architecture at Edinburgh University. My father's response at dinner was to say, "That's nice, Evie," and then turn to ask Dominic about his gap year plans. I took the train to Scotland alone with 2 suitcases and a hollow feeling I didn't have a name for yet. Edinburgh was the first place I ever felt like a person. I found friends who argued about ideas over bad wine. I found professors who wrote comments in the margins of my work that said things like "remarkable spatial instinct" and "this girl sees things others don't." I found for the first time in my life that the quietness that had made me invisible in my family home made me perceptive in the world. I noticed things. Structures, yes, the bones of buildings, but also the structures of people. The way power moved through rooms. The way silence could mean 20 different things depending on who was holding it. In my second year, something happened that I've never spoken about publicly until now. I found a box of letters in the attic of my student house, left by a previous tenant. They were addressed to a woman named Margaret from someone who signed themselves only R. I don't know why I read them. Loneliness, probably. But those letters, written in a voice that was tender and fierce and funny and heartbroken, felt more like family than anything I'd known. Whoever R was, she had loved completely and been discarded. She had rebuilt herself in silence. She had survived. I kept those letters for the rest of university. I read them when things were hard. I don't know why I'm telling you that, except that I think, looking back, the universe was preparing me for something. In my final year, 2014, I called home for my birthday. My mother answered, "Your father can't come to the phone, darling. He's with Dominic. They're looking at the company financials together. Isn't that exciting?" I was 21 years old. I held the phone against my ear and listened to the silence where a happy birthday should have been, and I thought, This is the last time I'm going to be surprised by this. I was wrong about that. There were many more surprises to come. I graduated with a first-class degree and a postgraduate offer from a firm in New York, Hartwell and Associates, a mid-size architecture practice in Brooklyn that specialized in sustainable urban development. It was exactly what I'd worked toward, exactly what I wanted. I told my father over a Sunday roast in the Hampshire farmhouse. He was carving the lamb. Dominic was talking about a development deal in Surrey. My mother was refilling her own wine glass. I'd stopped moving it by then. New York, my father didn't look up from the carving. What on earth for? It's a good firm. I'd be working on Callaway Estates has an architectural division, Evie. You could work here, be useful. That word, useful, not brilliant, not successful, not happy, useful. I want to develop my own career, Dad. He looked up then. His expression wasn't angry, it was something more deflating than anger. He looked faintly confused, the way you look at someone who's made an obvious mistake. Dominic's going to take over the company in the next 10 years, he said, as though this answered my question entirely. The family should be building together, not scattered around. I'm not asking for permission. He set down the carving knife. No, I don't suppose you are. That was the entirety of the conversation about my future. I flew to New York 6 weeks later. My first 2 years in Brooklyn were the happiest of my adult life. I had a flat share in Cobble Hill with 2 other women, Jade, a Jamaican-American graphic designer, and Priya, a doctor doing her residency at Methodist. We were all broke, all exhausted, all running on ambition and vodka coffee. We looked after each other in the particular way that women who have had to look after themselves always recognize in each other. I worked hard. I was good at the job. I had a gift for seeing what clients couldn't articulate, what they actually needed from a space, not just what they thought they wanted. My senior partner, a wiry New Yorker named Dan Hartwell who'd spent 40 years transforming neglected buildings into something breathing, told me in my second-year review that I had the best spatial instinct he'd seen in a junior hire in a decade. I should have been content. But the thing about growing up in a family that trained you to feel your place was peripheral, is that you carry that training everywhere. Even in Brooklyn, even surrounded by people who genuinely valued me, some part of me was always waiting for the moment when someone would turn to me and say, "Oh, we forgot, you don't really belong here." I'm telling you this not for sympathy. I'm telling you because I want you to understand the particular kind of loneliness that comes not from being alone, but from being in the same room as people who love you less than they could. It's a loneliness that doesn't have obvious edges. It hides inside family dinners and polite phone calls and Christmas cards signed with everyone's name. I went home for Christmas 2016. I was 23. Dominic had just been named managing director of Callaway Estates at 26. The announcement came over dessert, a formal thing, a speech, my father actually clinking a spoon against his glass like it was a wedding. My mother cried. My aunt and uncle applauded. Champagne appeared from somewhere. My father spoke for 4 minutes about Dominic's vision, his acumen, his extraordinary grasp of the business for a man so young. Nobody mentioned that I'd just been promoted at Hartwell. Nobody asked about New York. At one point, my mother patted my hand and said, "You always were the quiet achiever, Evie," which is the family dinner equivalent of a consolation prize. I sat at that table and smiled and raised my glass and said, "Congratulations, Dom," and meant it. Because I did love my brother, not the effortless golden version my parents had constructed, but the real Dominic underneath, who was funnier and more anxious than anyone knew, who'd called me at midnight once when he was 20 and told me he wasn't sure he wanted any of this. But he'd chosen it anyway. After dessert, while my father and Dominic retired to the study to talk business, I helped my mother clear the table. We worked in silence for a while. Then she said carefully without looking at me, "Your father does think about you, you know. He just doesn't always know how to show it with you." What does that mean? It means you're different from Dominic. You always have been. Your father connects to people who are direct, who want what he wants. He doesn't always know how to love people who go their own way. I stood there with a stack of dessert plates in my hands and looked at my mother. "So it's my fault," I said. "That's not what I know. It's fine, Mum. I understand." I went to bed at 10 o'clock and lay in the dark looking at the ceiling of the bedroom I'd grown up in, which had been repainted and refurnished without my input sometime after I left for university. My old bookshelves were gone. There was a guest lamp now. A generic guest lamp. The kind you buy at a motorway service station. I was a guest in my own childhood home. I flew back to New York on the 27th of December and I cried in the taxi from JFK, which I wasn't expecting. Jade was still awake when I got in. She took one look at my face, said nothing, and made tea. We sat at the kitchen table until 1 in the morning and she let me talk, which is one of the great acts of human kindness, just letting someone say the things they've been holding. You know what your problem is? She said eventually. You keep going back expecting different people. They're my family. I know, but family's not always the people who made you. Sometimes it's the people who see you. I've thought about that conversation almost every day since. My grandmother Rosalind died in January 2019. I say it plainly like that because that's how my family communicated it, plainly as a fact with no particular weight. My father rang me on a Wednesday evening. Your grandmother passed this morning. The funeral will be Saturday. We've arranged it. Which grandmother? I asked, because my mother's mother, Granny Catherine, was still alive in Wiltshire, growing award-winning dahlias and complaining about the council. A pause. Mine, Rosalind. He said the name like it was a slightly difficult word in a foreign language. She was in a care home in Edinburgh. There's no need for you to fly over, it'll be a small thing. Family only. I'm family, Dad, of course, I just mean it'll be simple. She would have wanted simple. He knew this, apparently, about a woman he never spoke about. He knew what she would have wanted. I flew to Edinburgh anyway. I told him I was coming and he said, as you like, Evie, in the tone that meant he wished I wouldn't. The funeral was at a small crematorium on the edge of the city, on a gray January morning that felt like the sky was apologizing for something. There were perhaps 12 people. My father stood at the front, stiff and formal, giving a eulogy that lasted 4 minutes and contained no specific memories, just generalities about a strong woman and difficult times and the values she instilled. I sat at the back and looked at the photograph they'd placed on a stand beside the coffin. Rosalind Calloway in her 50s, maybe. Silver-haired, direct-eyed, a slight smile that looked like it was keeping a secret. She had my father's jaw, and I noticed with a start my nose, my exact nose. I had never met her. My father had kept her from us, from me specifically. I would later understand the way you keep something from someone when you know it belongs to them. After the service, a man approached me in the car park. He was in his late 60s, thick white hair, an Edinburgh accent, wearing a suit that was good but not new. You're Evie, he said. Yes, I'm sorry, have we? My name is Douglas Ferrier, I'm a solicitor. I represented your grandmother for the last 20 years. He handed me a card. Ferrier and Munn, I've been trying to locate you. Your father's contact details don't quite seem to work for my purposes. Something shifted in the air. I can only describe it that way. What do you mean? I mean there are some matters pertaining to your grandmother's estate that concern you specifically. He glanced toward where my father was talking to a funeral director. Perhaps not here. When? I have an opening Monday morning, if you can stay in the city until then. I called Jade that night from my hotel room. Stay, she said, before I'd even finished the sentence. Obviously stay, I stayed. Douglas Ferrier's office was on George Street, 3rd floor above a jeweler's shop. Tall windows overlooking the gray stone of the new town. A desk stacked with ordered files, a gas fire, and a framed photograph of Edinburgh Castle in the rain. He offered me tea. I accepted. He poured it himself, no assistant, no ceremony, and then sat across from me and placed a manila folder on the desk between us. I need to give you some context first, he said, before we discuss documents. All right. Your grandmother founded a property development company in 1971. She called it Calloway Building Trust. Single woman, no formal qualifications, no family money. She built it from nothing over 20 years, mostly residential development in Glasgow and Edinburgh, some commercial, and latterly a land portfolio in the Scottish borders. He paused. By 1994, the company was worth approximately £8 million. I stared at him. In 1994, he continued, she transferred the company in its entirety to your father. He was 31. She believed, she told me this herself, that she was doing what mothers do, giving her son a foundation. A head start. He folded his hands on the desk. What happened next, she did not anticipate. What happened? Your father renamed the company Calloway Estates, relocated operations to London, repositioned it as a high-end commercial developer, which was his right, it was his company. But he also, and this is the part that took your grandmother many years to accept, he severed all ties with her. Professionally and personally. She received no ongoing stake, no acknowledgement, no income from the company she'd built. When she reached out, she was told the company was moving in a new direction. The gas fire popped. I heard the traffic outside on George Street. She spent a decade trying to take legal action. The transfer had been clean, she'd signed everything because she trusted him. There was very little to contest. Douglas Ferrier looked at me steadily. But she was a meticulous woman, your grandmother, and she kept records. He opened the folder. In 2003, Callaway Estates underwent a refinancing arrangement that required documentation of the company's founding assets. To establish the clean chain of title on the original Glasgow properties, your father needed Rosalind's signature on 2 historical deeds that only she held. He sent a solicitor to negotiate with her. What did she ask for? A fair acknowledgement, a share, her name in the company history, a pause. He refused all of it. His solicitor offered her £15,000 as a full and final settlement for the company she built, for £8 million of company. His voice was dry. She refused. The solicitor returned with $20,000. She refused again. She never signed. Then how did? The refinancing collapsed. Your father had to restructure the deal another way. It delayed his expansion by 18 months and cost him considerably. The faintest flicker of something crossed Douglas Ferrier's face. It wasn't quite a smile, but it was adjacent. Rosalind told me that was the last communication she ever had with him. She moved to Edinburgh. She lived modestly. She never spoke publicly about any of it. Why? He looked at me for a moment. Because she had a plan. And the plan required patience. He turned a page in the folder. In 2009, 10 years before she died, your grandmother contacted me. She had been following your father's career. She knew the company had grown substantially. It was publicly reported. She also knew, from what sources I don't know, that he had children. He paused. She knew about Dominic, and she knew about you. My chest tightened. She asked me to locate you specifically. She described you as, and this is her exact language, I have it written here, the one who reminds me of myself. Quiet and watching. The ones like that are always the ones who build. I couldn't speak. She wrote to you, Douglas said, twice. The letters were returned unopened. I believe I cannot prove that they were intercepted before they reached you. The silence in that office was the loudest thing I had ever heard. She watched you from a distance for 10 years, he continued. She followed your work when you were published in an architectural journal in 2016. She told me she cried when she read it. She had a printout of the article in her bedside table when she died. He cleared his throat. She also prepared this. He slid a document across the desk. Heavy paper, notarized, dated October 14, 2017. The last will and testament of Rosalind Margaret Callaway. I will not read the entire document to you, but I will tell you what it contained. In her later years, Rosalind had quietly accumulated something. The land portfolio from her original company, 3 parcels of undeveloped land in the Scottish borders, had never been transferred to my father. It had been held in a separate trust, one that predated the 1994 transfer, in a legal structure so carefully constructed that even the sharpest solicitor would have difficulty challenging it. By 2019, those 3 land parcels had appreciated to a value of approximately £4.2 million. She left me all of it. Not Dominic, not my father, not any of the various cousins and family acquaintances who populated the back rows of that crematorium. Me, with one condition. To activate the bequest, I had to present myself to the trustees of the Callaway Land Trust, a body of 3 independent members that Rosalind had established in 2008, within 60 days of her death, with identification and a letter of intent confirming I wished to accept. 60 days. Not a moment longer. She'd done what my grandmother had done in the story I told you at the beginning. She'd built in a deadline, not as a punishment, as permission. Why 60 days? I asked Douglas. He picked up a sealed envelope from the folder and handed it to me. She said you'd ask that. She asked me to give you this. I opened it carefully. 1 page, handwritten, the penmanship slightly shaky but still clear. Evie, if you're reading this, Douglas has found you and I'm glad. I want to tell you the things I should have said to your face if your father had allowed me the chance. I am your grandmother. I built something once. I let someone take it because I loved him and I believed love made people trustworthy. It doesn't, not always. I followed you as best I could from here. I read everything I could find. You became an architect. Did you know that's what I always wanted to be? I never had the opportunity. You had it and you took it with both hands, and I cannot tell you what it meant to this old woman to watch that. I've left you what I can. It isn't everything you deserved, but it's yours truly, cleanly, legally yours, and nobody can take it. The 60 days is because I know you, even without having met you. I know that you'll spend the first week telling yourself you shouldn't need it, the second week talking yourself out of causing trouble, the third week convincing yourself you're being selfish. I cannot give you unlimited time because unlimited time is not a gift, it's an invitation to hesitate. Don't hesitate, Evie. Step forward. Take what is yours, all my love. The grandmother who is so very sorry she wasn't there. Rosalind. I sat in that office on George Street for a long time. When I finally left, the January light was thin and pale over the city rooftops, and I stood on the pavement for a moment and looked up at the sky. And I thought about a woman who had cleaned office buildings at night and read legal textbooks by day, and who had built something from nothing and lost it, and spent 20 years making sure that a granddaughter she'd never met would be protected. I thought about the letters she'd sent that were returned unopened. I thought about my nose, her nose. I called Jade from the street. I need to tell you something, I said. Tell me. I told her. When I finished, Jade was quiet for a moment. Then she said, baby, go get what's yours. I did not call my father that night. I want to be honest with you about why. Part of it was strategy. I understood, having worked in a professional world for 5 years, that information is power and premature disclosure is a gift to the wrong people. But a larger part of it was simpler and more human than that. I didn't call him because I needed, for once, to do something entirely on my own, in the quiet, before his voice could get inside my head and rearrange the furniture. I went back to New York. I consulted an American attorney who specialized in international estate law, a woman named Dolores Huang who had the particular brand of calm precision that comes from spending 20 years being the most capable person in rooms full of people who underestimated her. I told her everything. She spent 2 days reviewing the documents Douglas Ferrier had sent her digitally. On the 3rd day, she called me. It's clean, she said. The trust structure is rock solid. Your grandmother's solicitor clearly anticipated challenges. There are redundancies built into this that I've only seen in the most sophisticated estate planning. She had good counsel. Can my father contest it? He can always contest. Whether he'd succeed is a different question. Dolores paused. The land parcels were never part of the 1994 transfer. The trust that holds them predates it by 6 years and was established in Rosalind's name only, never commingled with company assets. There's no credible argument he has a claim. What would you do? I'd accept the bequest and wait for the challenge that probably won't come. A beat. But there's one thing you should prepare for. Evie, what? The moment your father finds out, and he will find out, these things always surface, his first instinct won't be legal. It'll be personal. He'll try to talk you out of it. He'll use every relationship you have, your mother, your brother, family, loyalty, guilt. Make sure you know what you believe before that conversation happens. I spent the next 2 weeks doing something I'd never properly done before. I went very quiet inside myself. I canceled social plans. I took long walks along the Brooklyn waterfront in the February cold. I reread my grandmother's letter until I had it memorized. And I tried to understand what I actually believed. Not what I'd been taught to believe. Not the version of myself that existed to manage my family's comfort. What I, Evie Calloway, actually thought was true, what I found surprised me. I was not angry. Not in the consuming, burning way I think some people expected me to be. The anger was there, of course it was, but underneath it was something older and quieter. Grief mostly. Grief for the grandmother I'd never known. Grief for the little girl who'd moved her mother's wine glass and organized family holidays and been invisible for 23 years. Grief for the letters that came back unopened. But also, and this is the thing I didn't expect, relief. Because there is a particular exhaustion that comes from being the family member everyone underestimates, the one they've written a story about, the one who was slow or difficult or just not the same as the golden child. And when something comes along that simply proves them wrong, not dramatically, not as an argument, just as a quiet fact, there's a release in that. Like putting down something you didn't know you were carrying. On day 40 of my 60-day window, I called my father not to ask permission, to inform. He answered on the 3rd ring. I could hear the London background traffic, what might have been a restaurant. Evie, this is unexpected. I'm sorry to call in the middle of your evening, Dad, but there's something I need to tell you. I heard him step somewhere quieter. A door closed. Go on. I've been in contact with a solicitor named Douglas Ferrier who worked for your mother. He found me after the funeral. The silence that followed had a different quality from ordinary silence. And she left me a bequest, Dad. Some land in the Scottish borders held in a trust that predates the 1994 transfer. I've had it reviewed by 2 independent solicitors, both of whom confirm it's legally mine. Nothing. I'm going to accept it. I wanted you to hear that from me, not from a letter or a legal notice. His voice, when it came, was very controlled. The boardroom voice, the one he used when something had blindsided him and he needed you not to know it. I see. I thought you deserved to know. When did you say you were at this solicitor's office? February. I've spent the past 6 weeks having it reviewed. 6 weeks. Another pause. You've been sitting on this for 6 weeks without mentioning it. Yes, that's very deliberate, Evie. Yes, it is. A long breath. I imagined him in whatever restaurant he'd stepped out of, standing in a corridor recalibrating. Your grandmother was not well in her final years. Whatever documents she signed, whatever she may have believed she was doing, we should talk properly before you make any decisions. Come to London. We can sit down with the family, with our solicitors. I've already made the decision, Dad. I'm calling to tell you, not to ask. Evie, his voice shifted. Not to warmth, he couldn't quite reach warmth, but to something that wanted to pass for it. I know we haven't always, I know things between us haven't been, I'm aware that you felt overlooked, and I want you to know that. I don't need you to reassure me right now. My voice was steady. I was surprised by how steady it was. I needed that for a long time. I don't need it tonight. So what do you need? Nothing from you. I have what I need. I heard him breathe. Dominic is going to be fine. He has the company. He has everything you've been building together for 20 years. This isn't about Dominic. It's going to look, I don't care how it looks. Something shifted in my chest as I said it. That's new, Dad, for me. I used to care enormously. I used to organize my entire life around how things looked to this family. I'm done with that. He said nothing. I'll have my solicitor send you a formal notification. I wanted you to have this conversation first because I'm your daughter and I thought you deserved that courtesy. I paused, but please don't confuse courtesy for uncertainty. I know exactly what I'm doing. I ended the call. I sat on my bedroom floor. I don't know why the floor, but sometimes your body just knows where it needs to be, and I shook for about 5 minutes. Not with doubt. With the particular physical release that comes when you stop holding something you've been holding for years. Then I got up, went to the kitchen, poured a glass of wine, and texted Jade. I did it. Her response came in 30 seconds. I know you did. Come over. I went over. We sat at her kitchen table until 1 in the morning. She made the tea this time. The next 2 weeks were the worst ones. My mother called on day 3. Her voice was careful and unhappy in the particular way she had when she was trying to navigate between two people she loved. Your father is very upset, Evie. I know. He feels blindsided. He feels that you went behind his back. I went through a legal process, Mum. There was nothing to go behind his back about. It was my grandmother's estate. She was his mother. She tried to write to me. The letters came back unopened. A pause. What do you mean? Your grandmother tried to contact me. Twice. The letters were returned. I let that sit. Did you know about that? A longer pause. No, I know I didn't. I believed her. Whatever my mother's failings, and they were many and real, I believe she didn't know about the letters. I heard something shift in her voice then. Something that sounded like the ground moving slightly under her feet. She tried to reach you, yes, and James, she didn't finish the sentence. She didn't need to. Dominic called on day 5. I'd been dreading this one most. He was quiet at the start, processing, I could tell, the way he always processed, turning something over carefully before he spoke. She left it to you specifically, he said. Not split, just you, just me. She never even, he stopped. I didn't know her at all. Did you know her? No, Dad kept her from us. From you, Dominic said slowly. He kept her from you. She wrote to you, yes. Another silence. Evie, I want to say I'm sorry. I know that might not mean much right now, given everything, but I want to say it. He exhaled. I've been thinking a lot since Dad told me about how I've had so much. The company, the title, all of it, and you've just quietly been. I never asked. I just never asked how it was for you. No, I said gently. You didn't. I'd like to start. A long pause, if you'll let me. I want to be honest with you. I didn't trust it immediately. Trust is not a tap you can turn on. But I heard something in my brother's voice that I hadn't heard before, something undefended, something genuinely sorry, and I thought of Jade saying family is the people who see you, and I thought, maybe seeing is something you can learn. Maybe it's not too late. Let's talk, I said, not about the bequest, just let's talk. Okay, he said, yes, let's do that. My father did not call again. He sent a letter, an actual physical letter, through his solicitors, noting that he reserved the right to review the trust documentation and would advise accordingly. His solicitors came back 6 weeks later with a formal letter acknowledging the bequest as legally valid and making no contest. I think that was the hardest thing he'd ever done. Not for any feeling toward me, but because his mother had outsmarted him from beyond the grave, and he had to live with that. I allowed myself once alone to feel the full weight of that, not with triumph, with sadness. Because underneath everything, James Calloway had been a boy from Glasgow who'd been given something beautiful by his mother and had been too afraid, too hungry, too damaged in ways I'd never know to be grateful for it. He'd taken it instead, and she'd spent her whole life making sure that what he'd taken would come back to the right hands. The tragedy in that is real. I don't need to dress it up. Day 59, Edinburgh. I sat in Douglas Ferrier's office again, on a spring morning when the light was entirely different from January, clear and gold, the kind of Edinburgh light that makes the stone look like it's been burnished. I signed the paperwork accepting the bequest. Douglas witnessed it. Your grandmother, he said as he filed the documents, wanted me to tell you something in person if I ever got to this moment. What did she say? She said, tell her she doesn't have to build what I couldn't. She just has to build what she wants. I had to look out the window for a moment. At the gray stone and the gold light. At the city where a woman had remade herself from nothing. Thank you, I said when I could trust my voice, for everything you did for her, for finding me. She made it easy, Douglas said. She believed in you very specifically. That kind of belief is rare. I flew back to New York that evening. 6 months later, I left Hartwell and Associates with a reference that Dan Hartwell wrote himself, in which he told me was the best he'd written in 40 years of practice. I used part of the bequest to co-found a small architecture and development consultancy, sustainable residential projects, affordable housing partnerships, the kind of work that builds things people actually live in. I named the company Rosalind Build. The press didn't cover it. It wasn't that kind of story. It was quiet, like all the best things are quiet, a name over a door, a team of 5 people in a Brooklyn studio who believed in what they were doing, a land portfolio in the Scottish borders that we sold partly to fund the first project and kept partly as a long-term asset. My mother came to visit the office the following year. She stood in the doorway of our Brooklyn studio and looked at the project boards on the wall, housing schemes and sustainability charts, and a framed photograph of the borders land in autumn, and she said nothing for a long time. Then she said, she'd have loved this. I know, I said. Mum cried quietly the way she did things. I put my arm around her. We are not the mother and daughter I needed us to be when I was 12. I've accepted that. But she is trying now, in the way that people try when the ground has shifted under them and they finally understand what they nearly lost. I think grief taught her something. I think the story of those return letters, which she went away and thought about for a long time after our phone call, changed something in her. I don't know if my father will ever reach out. Some doors once closed stay closed. I've stopped waiting for that one to open. Dominic and I speak every week now. He came to Brooklyn for a weekend last autumn, the first time he'd ever visited me in New York on my terms. We walked across the Brooklyn Bridge in the morning light, and he told me about the pressure he carries, the performance of confidence he's been sustaining since he was 26, the voice in his head that tells him he'll never be enough. I told him about the Christmas dinners and the guest lamp and the years of being a degree or two outside the center. We sat on a bench in Dumbo looking at the Manhattan skyline, and we were, for the first time in our lives, just 2 people who had grown up in the same difficult house and survived it differently and come out the other side. Do you forgive them? He asked. I'm working on it, I said honestly. I'm not there yet, but I'm working on it. Me too, he said. On the wall of my office above my desk, I keep 2 things. One is a printout of the journal article I wrote in 2016, the one Rosalind had on her bedside table when she died. The other is a photograph I asked Douglas Ferrier to copy for me. Rosalind in her 40s, standing in front of a building site in Glasgow, hard hat, muddy boots, squinting into the sun with a look of absolute determination. She looks like herself. She looks like someone who built something. She looks a little like me. I've thought a lot about why I wanted to share this story. It's not for sympathy, I want to say that clearly. I have a life I'm proud of, work I believe in, people who see me, and a grandmother I never met who loved me more specifically than some people ever get to be loved by anyone. I'm sharing it because I know some of you are sitting somewhere right now with a family that has a story about you. The slow one, the difficult one, the one who went her own way, the one who was supposed to need managing, and you've been carrying that story so long that you've started to believe it. I want to tell you what Rosalind knew about me before she ever met me. The ones who watch are not the weak ones. The ones who are quiet are not the ones who have nothing to say. The ones who were failed are not the ones who failed. My grandmother could not be there for me in person. She was kept from me in ways that still make my chest ache when I think about them too directly. But she did everything within her power to make sure that I would not be erased. She kept records. She was patient. She built something that could not be taken. You may not have a grandmother who left you £4 million in a trust deed. Most people don't, and that's not the point. The point is what Rosalind understood, which is this. Your worth is not determined by the people who failed to see it. And the story they told about you is not the only story available. You get to write your own. I am 31 years old. I run a company named after a woman I never met who believed in me from 400 miles away. I have a studio in Brooklyn and a team I'd walk through walls for, and a brother who is becoming slowly someone I know. I have a mother who is learning. I have a grandmother's letter in my desk drawer that I read on the hard days. I don't need my father to see me anymore. I see myself. And that, finally, after 31 years, is enough. If this story reached something in you, if you recognize even one corner of it, leave a comment below. I read every single one. And if you know someone who needs to hear that they are not what their family decided they were, share this with them. Thank you for being here. Thank you for watching. This is Her Breaking Point. See you next time.